Oh yeah, gee, we already have 18, 19. It's growing. That's excellent. So welcome. This is our change-making panel, and we have a half hour. It's going to blaze by, I'm sure. So I'm going to introduce everyone to you, but I'm not going to go into their backgrounds. But I encourage you to take a look at the link that gives you their background information. The depth of experience we have on this panel is amazing. So who do we have? What I'm seeing on my screen of everybody is I see Nabil first. So I'm going to introduce Nabil Ahmed, and we have Christine Haggart and Amy Whitcroft, all the way from New Zealand. And Amy is here from the future. Is there, what, 16 hours ahead, I think? And so that's interesting. So you can tell us what tomorrow is like before we get there. And so welcome, everybody. Welcome to those joining us here. It's nice to see you. This is our last session for the day, except for a quick close. And I think we left it this way deliberately because change is a constant for us. So I'm going to pose this question to the panel, and we're going to start with Nabil. And the question is, the only constant we seem to have in life is change, constant change. What are your thoughts on how open data has changed from being a cool kids kind of thing at the beginning to now? And what can we expect from here? It's a loaded question. Take it away.
Thank you. I mean, I think it's still very much the cool kids that are attending Go Open Data. But I wanted to really share that I think the conversation has moved beyond open data in the circles that we inhabit. We've seen open data being seen as something that you had to fight for, as something that you almost take for granted. You don't have to really make the case for it as much anymore, even though and that's a great thing. I want to emphasize that, like the key principles of, transparency, greater accountability and engagement, I think are widely understood. Not enough though, and putting it in practice is challenging. In the work that OpenNord does in the advisory service with municipalities across Canada, we find that many of them are still struggling to really put it in practice. You have cases where, and perhaps, Christine will agree, like, you put out open data sets, that doesn't mean they're actually being downloaded and used. Often they are, but sometimes that adoption is still, lacking. And I think we've also begun thinking about digital inclusion, digital literacy, to ensure that there's a broader cross-section of society that can actually engage with it. Not just, the cool kids who were in the hackathons, but actually the cool kids at all walks of life, across all ages. And that's something that I think is really important. Shout out to Dr. Tracy Lorio, who's done a lot of thinking about, equitable access to data as well, which is really important. And I am reminded of also, and I think there's also this, as part of the broader kind of techlash that we've seen, the backlash against big tech, I think, there's a greater awareness of surveillance capitalism and what that entails and how open data could actually play into that. And there's a greater wariness about, the relentless quantification of life. And, the wonderful Bianca Valli reminded me this morning of that phrase, the tyranny of metrics. And what happens when we try to encapsulate everything about life in data sets? What are the unintended consequences of that? And people are beginning to think about that, which I think is a great thing. So open data is a beginning, but it's not the end. So I'll pause there with that provocation.
And I should have said, by the way, Nabil, you're the Senior Program Officer with Open North. And Christine, returning to you, of course, Christine is the Senior Manager, Data Access and Analysis, Ontario Digital Service. Are you ready, Christy? Take it away.
Yes. So I'm going to agree with Nabil that I think we're still all the cool kids. Everyone who's here today, everyone who's presenting here today. That's great. And similarly with the evolution of open data, yes. In fact, there's just GovLab released a paper recently called The Third Wave of Open Data that gives a really nice history and overview of how it has evolved. Yep, and it did, yes, it had its roots, open information, intersection with the open source software, with the civic tech. And it was at first, we did talk about just make it all open, just transparency, open by default. You heard that on one of the earlier panels, and it was just make it open, kind of a build it, they will come, but in this case, make it open and they will build it viewpoint. And then we kind of evolved from there with a little more of a focus on, let's try and make open things that can be used by people specifically to build apps for services, to make efficiencies, economic development, like a little more nuanced focus. but still on that civic tech kind of flavor to it. Still about, government as a platform, let's make it open and let's see what services, what apps, what everything built. And then I think most recently there's been a realization, again, as Nabil was saying, that really favored a certain segment of society. If you look at civic tech, they're not as representative necessarily as society in general. And so you've got a particular segment whose interests are being served by, whose apps are being built to serve their needs. We had fantastic, we had and we have fantastic successes, a lot of armchair auditors that found some great things. They found elements of corruption, elements of opportunities for cost savings, fantastic apps we all use on the phone powered by open data, some great things, but recognition that so much more could be done, and that it's not benefiting everyone equitably, that not everybody was under the open data tent as much as it could be. And so I think that's where we are now. And it's been wonderful to hear all the panels today, all the advocates, the community panel. There's still so much more that we can do building on. There's a lot of data we don't collect at all. Still, you've heard that environmental data we don't collect, social demographic data that we still don't collect, or we collect and don't make open. I'd love to see a more focus on questions about who benefits when we have this intentional data blindness. If we're saying we're not going to collect race data, say, and we're not going to use that data to inform our policies or decisions, well, who benefits from that? And love to see, you talk about data literacy. We do a lot of, and please time me because I have a tendency to forget my time. So I will stop at this. I can just go on forever. I'm very passionate about this topic, but data literacy. We just finished like a series about, machine readable data. We've got one coming up, an API and all of that. We need that, keep doing it. But at least our focus, in my experience, has been on practical applied data literacy, but like how to use data, how to clean it, access. I would like to see more on data literacy around the power of data, around the social context and the political context of data. I'd like to see data literacy. I don't care if you're never going to open a spreadsheet in your life, but understanding why it matters of who is represented in the data, how much power accrues to the people who get to decide what data we collect and how we're going to use it. So like that kind of data literacy, in answer to your where should we go next? And I keep going.
Fantastic.
But
and that really comes right from the last panel too, right? Because literacy is the key in all of it. Data, open data, etc. Amy, by the way, is the advisory board member, one of, I guess, from the Open Data Charter, and we had some of your folks do a webinar for us not that long ago. Amy, so welcome, and you're up.
Kia ora, everybody. Thank you so much for having me here. This was meant to be something that I was going to be doing in person, right? But then the world changed last year. So nonetheless, thank you for, I wave from the future, a very gray, very dull dawn of a Saturday. And I'm still waking up. So please excuse me if I don't make as much sense as I'd like to. It's such a great question. So I've been frantically scrolling notes as well while the other wonderful panelists give their thoughts. And I'd like to add some of mine. The first one is the cool kids thing. So this is where I'm going to respectfully and with great love kind of disagree. Is I don't think I'm a cool kid just because I'm into open data. And I'm sometimes worried about the whole cool kids thing because it's kind of intrinsically exclusive. Yeah, not everyone gets to be the cool kids, right? But also the punk in me just wants to go and like run away into the other corner and go, cool kids. Nonetheless, open data is an incredibly important thing. So I think where we're starting to see, and this varies hugely across different cultures and across different countries, right? And different scales. Some people are still very much starting that journey. Some people are quite evolved in that journey. But where we're going to is a much more collaborative space. So Christine, some of my points is talking about the third wave of open data. And it is such a great paper. The Open Data Charter was involved in it, as well as some other like absolutely fantastic minds. And the idea is, the first wave was all about pull. So journalists and other experts with FOIAs and things like that saying we want your data. The second wave these are all additive. They're not exclusive to each other. Was more about push. So that was the idea of open by default. Governments will just like dump stuff as much as they can. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's high quality. But also they're not quite sure what to be doing because we don't have infinite resources to do that. You can't just necessarily publish everything, even if you wanted to, by default. So there's this concept of publish with purpose, which I really love, which Christina, again, and Nabil alluded to, of why are you publishing the data? What's the purpose of it? Like, has anyone asked for it? Does anyone know how to use it? Are you engaging or at least trying to find the people who might want to use this data? That's a really important, and it's more sort of a short-term goal to help us to get to that long-term open by default goal. But I find it really helps people think about it. Why are we publishing this? Or why are we not publishing this if people keep asking for it? So I think that's incredibly important. And then the third wave is all about collaboration, right? So I think that some of the things that we're going to see next in open data is this idea that open data it's not a silo, and it hasn't been a silo for some time in terms of the data continuum, open, shared, closed, super, super, super secret squirrel in the corner. It's part of this beautiful continuum. So people are going to start, I think, getting quite a bit more sophisticated in how they deal with open data. And I can speak to that another time, from licensing through to tech stacks. But we're also going to see a lot more collaboration, and it's not just going to be governments. That's the whole point with the third wave of open data. We're going to see academia coming on board. We're going to see the private sector coming on board. We're going to see community groups coming on board, not only as consumers of the open data, but as providers of the open data as well, right? So the idea is everyone comes to the party and then we all work together, both to provide and to figure out how best to use the data. So what is the capability that we want to encourage? We can't necessarily always build it, but what are the communities that we want to help flourish? What can we help sort of lift up? But we do know that it can't just sit on government's shoulders anymore, or it shouldn't. And the other thing is it needs to be subnational. A lot of open data is quite high level, quite highly aggregated, and often at sort of national and international scales. Whereas there's huge demand at the hyperlocal scale, right? Because people care about where they live. So we're thinking local governments here, and like small ones, right? People care about where they live, the decisions that impact our day-to-day life. It's not necessarily central government. So what can we be doing to help the smaller organizations get on board and skip all of the legacy situations, tech mistakes that we've made, and come on board with a much more mature view, thinking about things like indigenous data sovereignty. That's going to have a huge impact, and is having a huge impact on how we think about open data, and a whole bunch of other things, data governance and stuff. So it's exciting, but it's a much more mature conversation now, right? We don't get to just sort of like run around going, this is easy, we'll like dump some spreadsheets on the interwebs.
It's a great point, isn't it? And we actually have, is that me? Yes, it is. Sorry, my bad. I have a question actually that came in from Amy, who was in our last panel, and she's asking, it has the word cool kids in it. So since we can't get together as much as the before times and share ideas and inspiration as often, can you share a new term or idea you have come across in your third wave of open data readings, events, chats to help us all be cooler kids again, or still? She didn't add that, just she ended it cool kids. So I think, do you want to take that one, Amy, since you were the dissenting voice on the cool kids, and then we'll see what the other folks think.
Yeah, I'd like to say, let's not think about ourselves as the cool or uncool kids. Let's think about the people who are often exhausted and trying to like keep pushing this. and kind. I mean, we're certainly all very nerdy. I think we can, and that's intrinsically awesome, right? Because yay, nerds. But so many good terms. I actually spend a lot of time these days thinking about sort of bias and things like warm data and small data and that sort of thing. But I'm happy to pass it to the other wonderful people on the panel.
Oh, do you want to jump in, Christine? Looked like you were ready to go there, or maybe not. Okay, Navia.
Maybe I can, while Christine was distracted, I can just, I think the question is about readings, and it's so hard. I tend to like read so many different things that I don't remember half of what I read, which is a challenge. But I think there's, there's definitely a lot to learn from indigenous data sovereignty. Ada Lovelace Institute has been doing some really good work in the UK. There's organization there. I think there are a lot of scholars in the global South as well. Center for Internet Equality, I think in India, Nanjira Sambuli in Africa, thinking about the future of things like digital ID, and because I think we often bring a very OECD centric perspective to this conversation. We take it for granted that, yeah, of course, open data, everyone's on board with it, but that's actually not necessarily the case. And I think it would help us to like think critically about, how open data has what are the limitations of that, and how it, sometimes can be deployed for, purposes that may not match the hopes and desires that, people like us, the people that, at least the hopes and desires that I might have. I can't speak for people like us. I can speak for myself. And I know, Amy, I want to say something. Just to finish my thought, I'll say that I think it's also, not about the cool kids, I think, and I think everyone here will agree that a lot of this is like fundamentally unsexy, and that's okay. Like, open data doesn't have to be the hottest thing. A lot of it is about maintenance. Like, a lot of the work of, as Christine said, practical data literacy is about just cleaning a spreadsheet. It's not really, it's not revolutionary. And that's, I think, something like the frame of thinking about maintenance versus innovation is something that I found really helpful.
Are you ready, Christine, to weigh in? Yeah.
No, I was gonna respond to something Nabil said. Sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. No, perfect.
I agree. He just triggered for me the yes. There's a lot of work in publishing open data. My gosh, we've been doing it since COVID hit, 7 days a week. That open data. It's a lot, as Amy said. It's exhausting. Still, for us, the main work around open data is culture. Still, it is all about changing the culture. It is about every day still. I wish it wasn't true 2 years in, but resistance to being open, fear of being open, not wanting to share. Those are the key skills above data. Actual data, how to clean data, how to visit data, how to data standards or metadata. Those are secondary to the ability to coach, the ability to cajole, convince, and not give up and not get tired. And yes, you're going to have the same conversation you've been having for 10 years, but you're expanding, because the ones you had yesterday are good. They're now releasing data, and you more and more. And I can't wait for the day when that when it is totally taken for granted. But at least inside government, we are not even close. When people talk about being worried about all the government data, just don't worry, we're not close. We got a long way to go there. But it is so fantastic to see, I forget which panelists mentioned, that yes, we are, the public demand and expectation for open data has increased. You just have to look at COVID and compare that to any previous one. We've never had record level data. Like Amy mentioned last time, we have data on every single confirmed positive case in Ontario at the record level, their gender, never have we had that kind of data in LTCs in schools, and it's out there. We can't control the message, which we'd love to do as government. We're sharing it openly, and that's a good thing. That's unprecedented in my decades on this earth. I've never seen that kind of, and I think if the government tried now to suck that back and say, we're not going to share that data, that there would be a revolt. And that, I think, is the success of all the open data advocates that have gone before us. So we've had fantastic. We can celebrate it still as we demand more and better, because there's still so much more to do. But I just want to get in that the culture is the #1 skill, work, everything still for us.
So I'm thinking the word normalized, it becomes familiar and a comfort level. I see you want to do a point, so take a quick one, and then I want to move on to another question. Yeah, go ahead.
Just a super quick point, because I definitely hear what both of you are saying and around culture and having the same conversation that you've had for the last 10 years with people. But I have certainly found in my learnings, and I'm very much on a journey with Te Ao Māori and Māori data sovereignty, is there is quite a fundamental tension between things like Māori data sovereignty and open data. So I've certainly learned for myself to be a lot more cautious, rather than saying that everything should be open data or the cultures must adapt to that. Understanding that for some people that is fundamentally maybe very uncomfortable or potentially not even appropriate at all, given previous things that have tended to happen in these situations.
Yeah, interesting. And I want to ask this question and relate it to a question we've got from the viewers. And that is, do we need a name change in open data? And I want to bring this out of us as government or people that are in the arena to the audience. And the question that's come in is, how can civil society help with the needed culture change with government? So I'm wondering, is it going to be possible, or do we have to do more in selling it to engage civil society to really get for change making? If we want to make it common and normal, where do you stand on that, and what do you think needs to happen in terms of moving the change forward?
I can start.
Christine.
Yeah. I used to say we needed a name change. I was a big advocate for a name change because nobody knew open data, and I've switched recently because I've been pleasantly surprised. We've actually been trying, like even our catalog in Ontario is the data catalog. I cannot get people to stop calling it the open data catalog. And the reason we changed name to the data catalog is because we've expanded what's on there. It's not, it used to be just open data, but we have a lot more than just open data on it. So we call it data catalog, and nope, everybody wants to call it open data. Okay. What I would love to see more of that I think would help from civil society as well is making those connections, because we have, like right now, the phenomenal coverage on COVID by the data journalists, by the epidemiologists, the volunteer science table that we have here in Ontario. People are glued to see those numbers come out. We've had investigative reports. We have community activists with dashboards. Everybody's looking at the dashboards and stuff. That's all powered by open data, all of it. Sometimes they still have to do work script, but it's all open data, but that connection is not being made. So when the public is seeing that, yeah, I go and I know whether or not my kid's school has, there's COVID in my kid's school or not, I know whether or not, LTC is my workplace, all of this information, but it's hidden that is provisioned and enabled because it's from their local community group. So if we could somehow increase that connection, have more marketing or something so that the public is aware that it's open data, that there's a connection there, and that what they're consuming and what they're benefiting from and what they're demanding more of is open data, that would be phenomenal if we could help making those connections.
Indeed. Our other panelists, just jump in. Who wants to comment further?
Something that I'd like to see, and huge tōrako as well to the COVID situation. It's been incredible just to show a whole bunch of people the power of open data, and also to show a bunch of people how really poor their tech stacks were when it came to needing to share data suddenly. A lot of works happened very quickly, and a lot of it's very impressive. Something that I think that we could also do just generally is much better storytelling about what people do with open data. It's a constant refrain in open data circles as people say, we release this and it's open, right? So we don't track it, but it means we don't know what people are doing with it. So it's very difficult to tell beautiful stories of this is the power of it, this cool thing happened. You can do it occasionally with huge things like NOAA data or Christchurch earthquake data, or, there are a bunch of them. But I'd love to know what communities are doing. Certainly, I wouldn't suggest that we change the name open data. I think that it says what it does on the box. It's got significant mana, significant background to it and history. And I'm not sure what I'd call it instead.
Yeah, I'll just add quickly that I think to add to these points, I completely agree with them. There's also sometimes in municipalities that we've worked with, it's not sometimes the resistance to openness is not sometimes it is worried about what the public would do, and sometimes it's internal because it's about changing the way that the bureaucracy functions on the inside, and it's difficult for civil society to really influence that unless we have a broader conversation about accountability, about duty, a duty of care as public servants. These are bigger and broader conversations that perhaps civil society can help open up. Why do we think in certain ways about accountability and the way that it functions? And the other thing is that I think interpretability, right? How do people, I think there's a concern that, people will take the data and, twist it, and civil society can definitely play a better role in in addressing that. This is I think also a question of platform regulation, but you think about all the misinformation that has come out in the pandemic, despite the open data. And I think civil society maybe could have played a different role in terms of anticipating that and addressing that. And not to say that it didn't. I want to address that. A lot of people saw that coming, but it's still been an issue.
Excellent. And I guess the idea is, we only had, I knew it was going to go fast. It's 4:24 already. I wanted to ask, if you had absolute control, king, queen of the world, what would be the first thing you would do? What would you dictate? What would be your first, with Biden going through his 100 days, what would you do first? And we'll probably only have time for that as a wrap. So let's start with Nabil again, just the way we started the opening.
I wouldn't even want absolute control. Like, I think I would try to figure out, how do I like, decentralize power and control, I think that's what I would love to see. But I think you're asking in the context of, I think really, maybe one thing I would say is like, ensure that we're able to like really implement interoperability and data sharing so that people don't have to worry about, well, I can't, your data set doesn't jive with my data set because they don't use the same, they don't have the same data standards, they don't define things in consistent ways. And that's still a missed opportunity. And I think we've seen that, even in the pandemic across Canada, where different provinces and different municipalities have different definitions sometimes. So maybe that's one thing. It's really a cop-out. I said the first thing that came to my mind, but hopefully that's helpful.
I'm not sure it's a cop-out because, if the first thing you say is we must collaborate, all together on this, it's not up to me. I like that. Christine.
And it's something we're trying to do, but expanding the open data programs, expanding the open data catalogs to be not just about, yes, be open with your data, keep sharing your machine readable spreadsheets, but I'd also like to be open with everything we're doing with that data. So if you're selling that data, if you're sharing it, linking it, if you're using it in algorithms or AI, the context, the decisions that you are not making, like being transparent and open about, again, just the data, but also all of the surrounding decisions and everything that are going into that data, that I would love to see that. And I'd like to see it as an expectation that when we talk about open data, we don't mean that just the literal bits and bytes, that we also mean all that social context and political context being open with that as well. I'd love to go to a data catalog and be able to see the procurements for data, like where we've purchased, and the sales agreements. I'd like to see a copy of the agreement. You can black out whatever you need to black out, but I'd like to go to the catalog and be able to see that as well. So I'd like to push, I don't know, fourth wave of open data and have that there as well.
Fourth wave, yeah, am I unmuted? I think I am. Fourth wave, it's coming. We're gonna see lots of waves. Amy, from the future.
Thank you. I love both of what you said. I mean, just it's beautiful. And to add on to both of those points, because it is such a tricky topic. You're like, do I just go on holiday for a month or not care? But I think what I would do is, well, a couple of things is I'd be looking to form partnerships as fast as possible with as diverse a range of people as possible. And I'd specifically be looking to seek out the groups that tend to get ignored, that tend not to be listened to, that tend to have smaller voices. That could be geographically, that could be demographically. There's a whole bunch of situations where people generally aren't listened to. I'd want to hear from them really, really, like, so much, because we hear from everybody else so much. And yes, I love that idea of open data, but all the context around it. So the fourth wave, why couldn't we have, why the data was collected to begin with? How was it stored? Where was it stored? What are the transformations that have happened to it? So there's things like steady state data flow modeling is a good way to think of it. What are all the transformations that have happened to this data? Who makes what decisions with that data? What algorithms and all of the other systems touch it? And you end up with a lineage that people can really start to interrogate and understand. I would think that would be pretty amazing, but that's a massively forward in maturity as well. People aren't even versioning their open data sets, let alone running steady state lineages over them. Still, it's something to aim for.
And in terms of where we're at, I think it's great having someone as far away as you are, Amy, because I think it makes us realize that, we have similar concerns, similar inputs, I guess, and considerations, and probably the same challenges. In fact, I'd say not probably, we do have the same challenges. So just for a final wrap from each of you, what would you say is the most immediate challenge then to take? And it may very well be the same thing you just said, but maybe not. Maybe you're going to start smaller in that case. What's the next step either you have to take or you feel has to happen? And go ahead. Yeah, sure. We'll go backwards.
Yeah, cool. I think the big thing is still resourcing. Open data in a lot of places, without going into specifics, tends to be quite under-resourced. So a lot of people have it maybe as part of their job. A couple of people in an entire department or entire agency as part of their job is thinking about open data, for example. Well, that lack of resource means that we're just never going to quite get on top of things. So I'd love to see that improve. But that's why we need the storytelling, so that we can explain what the value of open data is, so that you can get the resourcing, right?
Awesome. Christine.
Yep, resourcing for sure. We are public with our budget, and I guarantee you, you could control that all you want. You will not find a budget line item for open data. And I think that needs to change. There's no way we will achieve stability. It is still largely the champions and the enthusiasts and the grassroots. We're a little bit better in Ontario than others in that we do have chief digital data officer for law now, but even with that, we don't have dedicated budget. So you definitely need that if you want to scale it and you want to keep it sustainable. I would add for a plea for everybody, for the audience, for civil society, to please keep advocating and demanding and requesting. I know we've been complimenting ourselves because we ask the Toronto CBC, we have amazing data, COVID data, can be more, but in a large way, although we have proactively released some, a lot of what release has been reactive because of the demands of the epidemic, which is still good. I still give kudos to my own province, because other provinces, even with demands, they didn't release. But it's the tweets, it's the media interviews, it's the average everyday community people demanding that data get released is what's causing it to get released. And so please keep asking for it. And also, everybody likes to be praised, and everybody likes to receive good, kudos, including government and politicians and everyone else. And so when they're like, oh, these people thanked us for this open data thing, maybe we should look at that open data program and make it bigger, because it gets us good news stories, and they love good news stories. So also, when you get a chance to do that, the praise and the thanks, it goes a long way. You would be surprised the power your tweets have inside government. So please keep it up.
Fantastic. Over to Nabil. And I have the luxury, by the way, we're the last session before wrap up, and I'm the wrap up guy. So we're actually in the wrap up moment now. So we'll let Nabil wrap up our panel, and then we'll head into the final closes.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Christine, about how it's good to hear that, the tweets make a difference. I thought sometimes no one reads my tweets except for friends. Anyway, I think I want to come back to community engagement. I'm going to bring in a non-Open North example here in my work in the Muslim community in Canada. We are still concerned about, we just don't have, if you ask me how many Muslims there are in Canada, I don't know. Actually, no one knows, because we never collect that data. The long form census came out right now, and everyone is so happy about the census. But there's no question about religion, and there are reasons for that. But I think it's important to engage communities in deciding what data is collected and how it's used. So to add to that lineage that Amy talked about, I think communities need to be part of that conversation early, and then they need to be engaged in, how can this be used, and how could you use this for your, and if you don't want this data to be collected, they should have the right to share that as well, because as Amy said, for Indigenous data sovereignty perspective, that might not jive well always. And of course, in Canada, there's a long history of data being used in order to perpetuate colonialism. So I want to acknowledge that as well.
Unmute. Yes. Inclusion has come up again in our conversation. It's really been a theme that was carried over from the start yesterday to now. And I'm going to move into my wrap, I guess. I want to thank you guys for participating in the panel. It's just wonderful, and I hope we can meet again, and be it virtually or otherwise. Maybe we get you to come over next time, Amy, or vice versa. Let's do a Go Open Data by your neck of the woods. That would be awesome. So thanks again for your participation. And I'm just going to move into talking about feelings and thoughts for the whole conference. So you're welcome to stay on, or you may want to exit your cameras. It's nice to see some faces responding to me. But yeah, I really feel good. And that's a capital G, capital O, capital D, about how things have transpired. In my view, it's the best conference I attended. And I hope that doesn't sound biased, because I've been doing this in front of the camera and so on, but I got so much out of this conference. And I've said this before in one of the breaks, right? The focus and the diversions that might happen in a live conference with people right beside you, people coming in and all that stuff. It was a very different experience, and one of the best experiences I've had recently on a virtual conference, certainly. And I think that's important to note. So I hope you feel that way. We have a survey coming up that you can let us know what you felt was valuable to you. And that's really important for us to know as we think about the next conference. And it's so exciting that Mississauga announced that they're going to do the next one. It's perfect to know, and we can certainly see how that transpires. And I think it will be a combination of virtual as well. Why not, right? We're learning how to use these kinds of technologies, and we can bring a lot more people in that way, certainly. And the things that strike me again were the stories. We talked about using stories as a means of communicating. And I heard a lot of stories that really piqued my attention and tugged at my heart. And that's a good thing because, you know, it does make me want to participate rather than being casual about it or even cynical about it. We heard from a very diverse section of people during the conference too on the 2 days. And from the inclusion and diversity aspect, that's great. I think we want to at Go Open Data, and I would hope that people in the open data arena want to be as inclusive and diverse as possible. So I think the conference here was really good evidence of that. And I think, I'm not sure how you heard about the conference, let's say, or in relation to other conferences and so on, but it's great. Somehow it worked, right? We got a lot of different people here, and it's really great to see the exchange of ideas and how that can work. And in terms of going forward, there's lots of challenges that were presented, lots of information as to where we are now and where we want to go, what's good now. I heard a lot of really positive things that makes me feel personally that open data is going well. It's on track. And even though the track has kind of had some bends and winds and things like that, I think, again, COVID, which has been mentioned, has done some really interesting things around it. And Christine, you were saying that, and again, it's another one of the things where you use the term, it's out of the box. I can remember David Miller back in the city of Toronto, who really started the initiative in Toronto, was saying about now the genie's out of the bottle, and you know, we can't stuff it back in. And here's another example of a moment in time that's really caused some more stuff to move, and we really can't stuff it back into the bottle. And that's a good thing. It really helps all of our work. And even into the tune of resourcing and so on, you can see with positions like Hillary's position, who started us off this morning with some comments, that the fact that they exist and people are talking about chief digital officers, chief privacy. I mean, they've had privacy around in the context of things like FOIs and stuff, but people are starting to realize within government too that really now talks about data. And the issue there, which was talked about as well, is record keeping and how long do you keep it? And if it gets out as open data, it changes things a little bit, because maybe you would throw it away, but if it's up there and it's being used and utilized in something, you can't just cut off the tap. So those are the kind of challenges I think that we heard about. And that to me was just really exciting. And I think it positions on a go forward basis really, really well. And also interesting, the fact that we didn't get together in 2020 at all. So how could we keep in touch, right? In some ways we did, in some ways we didn't, because everybody was occupied with their own personal experience with COVID, some directly at work, but certainly personally at home, we were all faced with this. So that year's gap, I'm not looking at it as a negative exactly. I'm thinking it was a positive in terms of, at least for those that weren't engaging with the COVID data as part of their job, the other folks involved in it had a chance to ponder some things and maybe even pause what they were doing because of circumstances, and then to get back together and talk and find out what's going on is really exciting. It shows that, in fact, it didn't stop, actually. It may have slowed down for one reason or another, but it didn't stop. And I believe COVID was a real trigger for that in the community. And I can remember quite early on, Tracy, among others, I think Derek Alton was in on this, started a chain of what can we do with open data to help. And that's very powerful, I think, as a community again. And obviously Tracy was exposing some learning that they went through, which leads me to the hackathon tomorrow. One of Tracy's interns will in fact be demonstrating her work, and as part of the challenge, she'll be participating as part of her work actually. So there's some nice continuity there as well. So in some ways it's not over yet. There's still a hackathon, and if you haven't registered yet, you can through the go-open data. I shouldn't put it that way. I like to say our site is go-opendata.ca, but actually to register for this, you're going to go from our site over to the conference website, which is conference. God, I hope I've got it right. conference.opendata.ca, I think. If that doesn't get you there, you can get to it from our website. And I think we may have put it in the announcements, the address to actually register. It's a different registration process if you want to attend that. We'll also have some video, I believe, out of that too. So again, a reminder that the videos that we've recorded today will be presented. So if you want to go back and see some of the chat and talk, you will be able to see that, which is exciting. And I just really, personal note, I really have to thank so many people, the operations committee way back in 2019 that was talking about what we would do in 2019. And some of those ideas had to be put on hold, obviously. But we were lucky that a lot of the people that we wanted to get last year were available this year. And it was a long time coming to this. I said yesterday when we started, it was a long drive to get here, and none of us actually had to get in our cars. But it's true. So it really started in 2019 with a nice operations committee, and there's many names to thank. And it's like the Academy Awards time, right? If I start, I'm going to leave somebody out. So I'm going to just say a universal thank with that. But some of the people in particular are definitely our Cody and Corey gang, who were behind the scenes, and I wish we could see what was behind the curtain there as they were pushing buttons and then unpushing buttons. We were so thankful for their help. And the getting together with the panelists, we really have to thank Yuri for that kind of work, as well his work on Feedloop and his work on the website. It's just amazing effort, and Yuri, hats off to you. I appreciate having the opportunity to what do we call this, webcast, Zoomcast, or whatever as your MC, and let you know the cafe is coming up next. I hope some of you may still have a little bit of Zoom life yet to join in, and then I would like you to comment and talk this time out. So that's coming up shortly. I just have to go into a different account and set that up and get it going. But really a big thank you to the folks behind the scenes. I can't do it without you, obviously. And what was so interesting about this as a conference too is we didn't have to provide food or beverages. It was all on you to have whatever you had at home and so on. And that's another different thing, right? Because an aspect of putting a conference together, of course, involves you catering and seeing how that goes. It's extra expense and so on. So those expenses were replaced by other expenses, I guess you could say. I once had a conversation with the chief financial officer in the city of Toronto about how they went to internet protocol phones. And he said, yeah, we saved, I forget what his figure was, let's just say $60 million. And I said, oh, great. So that means you can reduce taxes. And he said, oh, no, that was replaced by all the other stuff that we have to do. So one gets replaced with another. So we're almost at closing time. This was by request. I'm going to grab the guitar here. Abe, if you were in his lightning talk, talked about playing guitar and stuff. So I do have an open data song that goes back a long ways now. And I remember wanting to do this at, it was a conference at the ministry downtown. And it was some celebration. It was probably Open Data Day. And I did it a cappella actually. And then I wrote the music to it afterwards. But I can remember being on the subway and thinking, yeah, what kind of fits together as an open data anthem? So it's an appropriate close, I think. It's, I call it the unofficial Open Data National Anthem. So you don't have to stand for this, but you do have to put your hands on your most important data as we go. And there's also a part for you to sing along with too. And I'm just going to trust that you will sing with me. So let's see how it goes. You say data, I say data, but it doesn't really matter. Open data or open data, no, it doesn't really matter as long as it's free, machine readable, and available. You may say a PDF is good enough. If they don't like it, well, that's just tough. Let's not open. That data's frozen. Can't boil that ocean. Here's a notion, make it free, machine readable, and available. Open data or open data, no, it doesn't really matter as long as it's free, machine readable, and available. Here's where you sing, as long as it's free, machine readable, and available. available. Last time, as long as it's free, machine readable, and what? Let me hear you say it. Virtually and available. There you go, folks, the Open Data National Anthem. It's been great seeing you and talking to you virtually. Hopefully we'll see you in the cafe, but if not, stay tuned for more good webinars and the good cafes on a regular basis. And we're looking at some pop-up events and all kinds of exciting things leading up to next year's conference in Mississauga in 2022. So that being said, good day, good night, drive safe, and of course, be good to each other. We'll see you next time. Bye for now.